Don't miss Folger Theater's How Shakespeare Saved My Life, playing now through July 5th at Folger Shakespeare Library. The autobiographical solo comedy by Broadway star Jacob Ming Trent has been called a vivid, deeply personal narrative about survival, resilience, and the transformative power of language by stage and cinema. Born with a gift for poetry but rejected as unfit to play the part of a poet, Ming Trent invites us to take a deep dive into the crevices of his youth. Calling on the bard and a host of genius rappers, half-crazed preachers, and soulful poets, he takes us on a propulsive ride that reaffirms the power of language and music. Folger Theater delivers yet again, says the Washington lobbyist. Go see it, bring a friend, talk about it after. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by phone at 202-544-7077, Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get yours today. Today on CityCast DC, there's a big apartment complex in Northeast D.C. where the landlords have let conditions get so bad that the local D.C. Councilmember wants to give them a tax break. Say what? Zara Norman of NOTUS has been covering the saga of the Gale Eckington, and she's here to explain. Today is Tuesday, June 23rd. I'm Michael Schaefer. Here's what DC's talking about. Zara, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
All right, so you recently wrote this story. It made my head want to explode, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Basically, you tell the story of this apartment building where the tenants have had to live in absolute squalor. And now, as a result, the city might give the landlords a tax break. What the hell? Can you sort of back up, explain what's the building, where it's located, what happened?
Yeah, totally. So we're talking about the Gale Eckington, which is 4 buildings on Eckington's Q Street in Northeast D.C., 603 units. More than half of them are affordable housing, but a lot of them are also vacant, right? Because a lot of people have been living in these terrible conditions, moving out. There's a really high turnover rate. And the people living there are a mix of market rate tenants who just kind of enjoy the sort of cheaper rent, and a lot of people who really, were housed through homelessness programs or just through looking for income-restricted housing. A lot of them are disabled. A lot of them have sort of needs. And yeah, for many years now, they've been living in, as you say, terrible conditions. Councilmember Parker called them deplorable conditions.
Can you give some examples of some of the deplorability?
Yeah. I was told by a couple of them that if you're going to live there, you should have a cat because of the rodents. There were pests. The pests were pretty unbelievable. I actually saw some roaches in traps myself in the gym. There's issues with heat and AC. Some tenants don't have control of their heat and AC, and it gets super hot in the summer and super cold in the winter. And then there's just kind of routine things that don't work. Like there's an elevator that's broken right next to the apartment of a woman who uses a wheelchair. She hasn't been able to leave her apartment easily for 4 months.
It's been broken for 4 months?
4 months, since early February.
What has she been doing during this time? Because, I think a lot of people who live in sort of not dysfunctional buildings would think like, okay, elevators break sometimes, and you call the management and they, at a fairly quick interval, will get someone out there to fix it. What has been her experience these 4 months?
Yeah, not in this case. So she originally was going to have a ground floor unit because she does use a wheelchair and is blind. And they relocated her to the second floor with the sort of provision that there was an elevator right next door. These buildings are huge. So what she's been doing since it broke down in early February, and of course she's put in routine maintenance requests. So of other residents who rely on the elevator and management, I was shown a series of emails where they just kind of say, we're going to do this as soon as possible with no distinct timeline. And it's been, as I said, over 4 months now. And in the meantime, she's had to go down, I think she timed her journey for me, and it took 2 minutes for her to go down 3 long corridors to the opposite side of the building and use an elevator on the opposite side. The problem with that elevator being, of course, when it reaches the ground floor, there's no ramps outside. So she just had a terrible time leaving her apartment, and obviously it's made her scared for if something were to happen, like a fire or something that would require her to, have to have an expedited way to get out of her apartment.
Wait, so she is a tenant. She is paying rent, or rent is being paid for her.
Yes.
And she contacts management. it sounds like they sort of give her the old okie dokie, right? Like, we got someone on it. But has she seen any evidence of anyone showing up and like looking at it and thinking?
No. Yeah, they have this sign posted, and Department of Buildings, they called them and they came out. But what I heard from a housing attorney is that, the Department of Buildings, they can issue a citation, they can tell the management or owners to pay a fine, but they can't really enforce anything. And so that's kind of been a common refrain with this building. It's been, in the last 3 years, over 250 violations are still outstanding at this place. And all the Department of Buildings can do is keep coming out and keep issuing citations that the property owners have not resolved a meaningful percentage of. And as for fines, they've only paid 7% of what they've owed so far. So the tenants have been caught in this really hopeless situation and have looked to the government to give them a way out. And that's how we kind of arrived at this tax abatement proposal. This is what, a DC council member is proposing as a way to kind of force those repairs, because these tenants have just been living in this terrible situation for so long.
I mean, I would imagine a lot of these tenants would prefer to see the landlords frog marched off in handcuffs or something.
Yeah.
Who are the landlords and how did they get there?
Yeah, so the property owners are, so it's the management and then the ownership. The management has really been changeable. They've cycled through many different management companies in the last couple of years. Right now, it's a company called Gates Hudson, who I can't tell you much about because they never replied to my requests for comment, which didn't surprise the residents who haven't been able to hear from them on repairs either. But the owners are Jonathan Rose Companies and JBG Smith Properties, who kind of acquired this property as a joint venture at the end of 2022. Acquired it for over $200 million, pledged they were going to invest $9 million into the property. And, a lot of the residents are frustrated because they feel like Jonathan Rose Companies is this big New York-based developer. They have over $4 billion in assets under management.
JBG Smith is an enormous company and a huge local player in politics and business.
Absolutely, absolutely. So between these two, people are pretty frustrated and kind of question why their own capital can't be sunk into, especially some of the smaller repairs or the ones that are, needed to comply with the ADA, like the elevator outage. So yeah, these companies came in, sort of pledged repairs, and a spokesperson told me they've invested $5 million into the property in the last couple of years. But, they say they can't fix any of these problems because tenants aren't paying enough rent to cover their operating expenses.
And are the tenants not paying rent? I mean, based on your interviews, are the tenants not paying rent because they're pissed about the deplorable state of the building, or are they not paying rent because, we've seen the stats on this, that D.C., particularly in quote unquote affordable housing units, has a very high rate of rent not payment, and it makes it fairly hard to kick out people for non-payment. So, which is to say, I know there is a formal way you're supposed to do it if you are like withholding your rent out of protest about conditions. Is that what's going on, or is this just a more general non-payment?
It's a mix of both. Based on the interviews I had with folks, like some people have fallen behind on rent, and then others are legally withholding it because they're frustrated. And it's sort of a chicken and egg situation because, some people didn't pay, so some things didn't get fixed. And now, people have standing, and all they can really do when conditions are bad because of the way, the Department of Buildings works is to withhold their rent. So yeah, it's a mix of both. And yeah, no, tenants are definitely frustrated and they have every right to withhold rent. And as a housing attorney told me, whether tenants are paying rent or not, a property owner is required to keep buildings up to code. So while it can be challenging for property owners, the way the law is configured, they have to make those fixes, whether they have the kind of rent coming in or not.
Okay, so just to back up, you have described rodents, roaches, non-working heat, non-working cooling, an elevator that has sat for 4 months next to the apartment of a disabled person without any evident effort to fix it. And if my math in my head is correct, they have been issued a bunch of fines and citations and have not paid 93% of them. Why is it that these people should get a tax break?
Right. And that was the question that led me to write the story in the first place. When we spoke to Councilmember Parker, Zachary Parker, about this and why he proposed it, someone else described this to me as sort of a lose-lose situation, right? There's really no good way out of this death spiral, as Parker termed it, that would satisfy everyone. But the idea is that this $21 million tax abatement would be over 10 years, and the property owners can only claim it if they fix every outstanding issue, and they pay all those fines, and they solve all the problems.
Sorry, I'm just incredulous here. Are the property owners claiming that they can't afford to fix these things? Because you've just explained that these are billion-dollar corporations.
Yeah, and they didn't respond to my kind of more pointed questions about that. But yes, their claim is that they cannot keep this property as affordable housing in the way that it is now if they do not get this tax break, which we kind of, through our reporting found that, actually these guys have received millions of dollars in tax abatements. JBG Smith did when they owned the property themselves prior to 2022 from 2015. From 2017 to 2022, I think it was, they received already over $9 million in tax abatements from the city. So, I mean, the big question through all of this that, will be answered, frankly, by the chief financial officer of the city if the tax abatement does get pushed through the committee of the whole is, we have to look at their books, right? Can they actually afford to make these changes, or are they just kind of looking for a tax break? It is definitely something that's frustrated the residents, to see the millionaire, billionaire property owners crying broke. But also at the same time, some of them are like, maybe this is the only way that we actually get to live in a safe place where these changes have been made. So it's a really complex question, but yeah, no, these guys are definitely saying that they don't have the money to make the repairs while keeping the rental units affordable. And this non-payment crisis is something, as you mentioned, that is plaguing a lot of affordable housing complexes around DC and the nation.
So effectively, what we're talking about when we use this word affordable housing is things that are somehow subsidized, where the government or other entities are paying some of the cost of the tenants or of operating the building in order that whoever is the owner can, remain a going concern, can make a profit. Right. And I guess what the council member, Zachary Parker, is saying is that effectively the subsidy needs to go up, and it needs to go up by the taxpayers giving these guys a break because they can't afford to own the place and run the place without that break, even though they have, I think, proven themselves like pretty irresponsible citizens. Right.
Yeah. And I think this is the beginning, right? This is just the proposal, and this number, the $21 million number, is coming from, this is what the property owners have requested. It may well be that, like, if this gets through the chief financial officer, maybe a different number is proposed. But yes, essentially that they're asking for that subsidy for the taxpayers to spend a bit more on keeping these, $21 million more on keeping these 300 plus affordable units affordable, like preserving them. And I think that's when we spoke to Parker, that was his priority, was making sure we don't lose these units and kind of trying to figure out a way that the conditions could be fixed while keeping the property owner's business, keeping them happy and in ownership of this place.
Don't miss Folger Theater's How Shakespeare Saved My Life, playing now through July 5th at Folger Shakespeare Library. The autobiographical solo comedy by Broadway star Jacob Ming Trent has been called a vivid, deeply personal narrative about survival, resilience, and the transformative power of language by stage and cinema. Born with a gift for poetry but rejected as unfit to play the part of a poet, Ming Trent invites us to take a deep dive into the crevices of his youth. Calling on the bard and a host of genius rappers, half-crazed preachers, and soulful poets, he takes us on a propulsive ride that reaffirms the power of language and music. Folger Theater delivers yet again, says the Washington lobbyist. Go see it, bring a friend, talk about it after. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by phone at 202-544-7077, Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get yours today.
I have a bit of good news to share from our sponsors at the D.C. Department of Behavioral Health. And that is that D.C. is turning a corner, and the numbers back it up. Fatal opioid overdose dropped 33% in this city from 2023 to 2024. Now, that is not just data. That's real people and real families that are still together. But listen, the work isn't done, and neither are we. If you or someone that you love is struggling, help is closer than you think. Text Live Long DC to 888-811 to connect with treatment, housing, and recovery support right here in the district. Free Narcan is available at nearly 40 locations across DC because nobody should lose someone for lack of access. And if you're in crisis right now, call or text 988. Know your worth, know your alternatives, know your value, know yourself. Recovery is possible. Find out how at knowyourpathdc.com.
You said there's also a lot of market rate housing in this complex.
Yeah.
So some people are not being subsidized. And those people are just as inconvenienced by this grotesque bunch of conditions. Is it just that that they're having financial hardships because of the situation and therefore can't afford to do this, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, I mean, something I think that I wasn't able to get a handle on, and something that hadn't been brought up in sort of statements from them, is I think there's a really high, I think the bigger problem might be that there's just a really high vacancy rate. I think the problem is not just like the tenants who are there and are not paying. I think it's that so many people have moved out because of how deplorable living there is that they can't fill these apartments. Like, they can't convince people to move here because, there's these horror stories coming out of it about what it's like. And in a 600-unit building, 4 buildings is a lot of upkeep. And I'm sure that's a big part of the struggle. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I personally, from my conversations with residents, from my seeing the building and the conditions and seeing the DOB violations rack up over the years, I feel like something else is going on. And when I talked to residents, a lot of them said, in fact, that they had paid rent and they'd been improperly billed and sort of told that they owed rent when they didn't. So it could be a problem with the sort of financial, like the bookkeeping of the management company. Yeah, to me, that does seem like there's something else going on. And I hope that maybe, this tax abatement proposal might allow the DC Council to open the books of these companies and take a look and see actually what is going on, and can they afford to sort of patch up where people aren't paying rent. And, I talked to plenty of people who were paying rent up until these things happened. And then, rightly and legally were like, no, I'm not paying for, if management's not going to come out and fix my elevator and fix my oven when it breaks and clean, do pest control. I spoke to one guy who'd been begging for management to do pest mitigation on his apartment that is infested with roaches for 6 months before someone came out. And so, these people are like, why would I pay for the services that I'm not getting?
And what do they think about the idea that their landlords who've behaved in such a disrespectful, horrible way would now get a tax break?
They're really frustrated. I mean, how I got this story kind of going even was just coming out to the property. I was speaking to one tenant. I went out 3 times. The first time I went out, I just spoke to a tenant outside the building, and she was complaining about the handicapped button to open the door automatically hadn't been working for months as well. And she'd brought it up to the Department of Buildings. She brought it up to management. Nothing had happened. A tenant overheard her complaining. And, within 10 minutes, I had like 8 people swarming me, just like incredulous about this proposal they'd heard about, so upset about conditions, really wanting to get their story out there. I mean, people are really fired up about this, and they, have been pestering me for there's no hearing date on this or anything scheduled. But they all want to show up and they want to sit down with their council member and really be heard on this because, I mean, it's to them pretty ludicrous that after all of this, and especially, with what we revealed with the lobbying that the property owners have done, they've hired a lawyer from a white-collar law firm here in D.C. to sit down with council members and staffers 9 times in the last couple months.
If my math is correct, that's 9 more times than a elevator repairman has shown up.
Yeah, I mean, they've struggled to get that audience, right? I mean, they've been really trying to talk to their property owners and management about this for months. And so to kind of hear that as they've been fighting to be heard on this elevator issue and so many others that their property owners are courting the council, it's even if the proposal's coming from a good place, a lot of them are pretty upset by it.
Okay, like you mentioned, these are big firms, a New York firm, JBG Smith, one of the biggest players in D.C. These companies give a lot of money in politics. Well, what's going to have to happen now is that the entire D.C. Council is going to have to vote on this tax abatement proposal.
Right.
Have the owners of this building been generous donors to members of that council?
They disclosed giving $1,400 to the council. I'm not really sure from the disclosures themselves who it was directed at, but that was within the last couple months. And in particular, they met with the council chair, Phil Mendelson, like a couple times in meetings and in emails. So that didn't sit well with residents as well.
Yeah, $1,400 buys a lot of roach traps.
Well, that was their point, right? I mean, it sounds like a small amount, but $1,400 would have gone a long way probably in fixing some of these issues, especially when, they feel like that management has really been pinching pennies and, not really opening. Their pool hasn't been open ever on time, and they don't have access to the lounge space, and there's been issues with receiving packages and getting pest control out. And yeah, it does feel like anything would have helped. And so even though they haven't spent a ton of money lobbying on this particular tax payment issue, I didn't look into their broader financial disclosures for that period. The sentiment was that I think one resident texted me after she saw the story that she felt sold out for $1,400, which was pretty upsetting.
So what happens now? Zachary Parker, he represents the area in the D.C. Council. He introduces a bill asking for a tax abatement. He can't just do that, unilaterally.
Mm-hmm.
What is there's going to be hearings, you said, and then a vote. What's the timetable of that?
Yeah, so no timetable yet. The bill was introduced in early May. It had a hearing in mid-May in front of the Committee on the Whole, or some sort of thing where the company representative from Rose Companies and JBG Smith was able to kind of pitch the proposal. And no vote has been scheduled on it yet, no further hearings. But if the council does decide to move forward with it, the chief financial officer would get to take a look and kind of write up a report, as it did in cases like, the RFK Stadium, when a tax abatement was proposed there. They'll kind of crack the books of the owners and decide whether they want to recommend this proposal moving forward. If they don't recommend the tax abatement moves forward, that actually doesn't kill the tax abatement. It just raises the threshold for the number of DC council members who would have to vote yes to get it pushed through. But yeah, I know there's been no update recently, and I know a lot of residents are really waiting to have their turn to sort of speak in front of the council and air their grievances.
Did the representatives of the landlords at least look a little bit ashamed when they were up there?
I actually wasn't at the hearing, but I read their statement, and from what my kind of interactions with them, no, I mean, they really do think that this is what they need, and they do feel like they've invested millions of dollars. They say they've invested $5 million in the property in recent years. And yeah, I think they would genuinely consider themselves good stewards. And I know Rose Companies kind of positions itself as a champion of affordable green housing from its sort of marketing materials and website. So yeah, I would think that from their statements, they seem to be thinking that this is the right move and that this is in the best interest of the tenants, and that they're genuinely sort of hamstrung by the non-payment of rent. It doesn't seem like there's been close communication between them and the tenants, or that they kind of acknowledged any really of the violations or the struggles that these tenants have been facing as they try to get repairs made.
Has anything like this happened before in DC or elsewhere, where building with deplorable conditions winds up getting a tax break because it convinces them that it's not going to be able to fix the deplorable conditions otherwise?
Well, this building received a bunch of tax abatements in recent years. Before even JBG Smith came on, it received $1.8 million, and then from 2017 onwards received over $9 million. And I've spoken to at least two people who lived there around 2022 when there's before Rose Companies came on, and they had similar complaints about break-ins and rodents and rats and, safety issues. But in terms of a broader crisis, I mean, I'm pretty new to DC, so not that I've particularly seen, but I mean, what I've heard from experts is that the worry is that this could set a precedent, right? I mean, what's to stop other affordable housing owners who are having non-payment of rent issues to cry broke to the council and try to get a tax break for it?
It doesn't seem like much of a disincentive, don't go screwing your tenants or else we'll give you a tax cut.
Yeah, that's the fear, at least.
Just before I let you go, are there, you've painted this picture of cities, Department of Buildings coming out, writing citations, the citations don't get paid, and they effectively have no other power over the landlords. Are there other models, other ideas of what you could do to give, your government more power to enforce decent conditions for people?
Yeah, one thing I heard from the housing attorney I spoke to at Legal Aid DC was that we could try to introduce new enforcement mechanisms to the Department of Buildings or try to make them more effective in, enforcing repairs. Last fiscal year, 2024 is the last fiscal year we have data for, but they collected only a fraction of the fines that they charged people, and they had to refer $25 million to the city's collection units. That's a huge amount of money, especially when DC is facing, a budgetary crisis.
Could the city take over the building?
I actually haven't heard about that, but certainly I'm sure it could be a possibility, not something that I've heard anyone float so far. I did look, I spoke to a fellow at the Urban Institute who pointed to some states that just have created a multi-million-dollar pot of grant money for any subsidized housing properties that have needs and repairs to draw from. They say that preserved more than 3,800 units of housing, and that was in Illinois, and they authorized another $30 million this past February for that. So that could be an idea. Instead of DC kind of doing a tax abatement for one property, what if it took that $21 million and made a pot of funds that, any property could draw from if it wanted to do something like fix an elevator that it doesn't have the cash flow to do immediately.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of stuff in my house I'd like to fix, and I don't have a pot of money to draw from.
Yeah, I think the answer to all of this could just be that the property owners use their own capital to fix these issues, right? It's just we have to take them at their word that that's not a possibility for whatever reason. So yeah, in terms of other solutions, I haven't heard many beyond this tax abatement proposal. And that's, I think, as well, what's frustrating residents is that there's not more creative or broader and more fair ways of thinking about this. Because I've also spoken to people who don't live there and are taxpayers and don't want to foot the bill on, landlords maybe kicking the can down the road on some basic repairs. So yeah, it was described to me as a lose-lose-lose situation for the city, the residents, and, the property owners.
And the thing you just said, you have to take their word for it. I don't know that the record that you've laid out in your reporting suggests these are people whose word you should just take at face value. Last question before I let you go. Do the individual tenants have recourse? Can they sue the management company? Can they make demands, cutting out the city's bureaucracy? Can they make their own demands and sort of get their pound of flesh that way?
Yeah, I have spoken to the woman who's sort of at the center of our story, Wanda, who is the woman in the wheelchair and who's blind and has not been able to leave her apartment. She has a lawyer, and I think they're speaking about, with that ADA violation in particular, if they can take that up. And yeah, I think a lot of them have been talking about maybe some sort of class action thing to fix things, but a lot of these people don't have a lot of money. It's why they live here in the first place. And there's legal representation is expensive. Going through a legal process is expensive, especially when you're not guaranteed anything at the other end of it. So I think these people are really relying on their government to do something for them. I think they're not really thinking too much about lawyering up on the individual level. But yeah, there's certainly been talk of that. And there's certainly been talk of, they're in constant contact with the Department of Buildings. They've even said some of the inspectors look pretty frustrated when they come back time and time again to see the same issues and to see nothing has really been fixed. So yeah, certainly something needs to change. And like I said, the residents are really relying on the council to do something creative and something they feel is more balanced and gives less leeway to their property owners.
Zara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Before we go, I want to thank our new CityCast neighbors, Madeline H., Ed G., Janice P., and Rachel L. And if you want to become a neighbor, head to membership.citycast.fm. Members get ad-free listening, exclusive members events, and a weekly events newsletter. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.